to the Do Bash. This is our second podcast. Last week we done the Halloween, where we were talking the Halloween movies, and this week we've decided to do a show called Talking Our Favorite 90s Albums. But before we get started, I think I need to give everybody a little background of what the Do Bash is. See, back in the day when we were in high school, we would all get together at whoever's house, and we would call it a Do Bash because we would drink Mountain Dew all the time while we were sitting up late trying to act like we were something we wasn't. But basically, when we would say we was having a Do Bash, we was all getting together and just basically talking about Lord knows what until the wee hours of the night. So like I said, today, for this week, we've decided to talk about our favorite 90s albums. Is that right, Matt?
That's right, man. I think one of my favorites was from U2, and it was Octane Baby that came out in 91. And to me, that album was probably the best U2 ever did, because you came out of Rattle and Hum, then you came out of Joshua Tree in the late 80s, and then you ran right into Octane Baby in 91. And it was just like such a different sound than what U2 had done previously. And I remember getting that album, and I remember before I got it, VH1 and MTV played One, and they played Mysterious Ways all the time. I would be over at Daniel's house, and you couldn't turn on those two music channels and not hear those two songs during that. I mean, it was just, they played them all the time, and they were really good songs too. I remember Mysterious Ways was just such a different song from what U2 had done previously. And then when One came out, One was just like, man, it's a really good, like a ballad type. I mean, the lyrics are really good on that. And I was like, that's sort of like a romantic song. And it's actually, if you think about it, it's like probably like my top 50 songs all time. I mean, it's just so good. And I got really fond memories of that album, and I still play it today.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. Daniel, what's your take on U2? Because honestly, I never listened to U2. I wouldn't know the first song that they had, so I don't have much input to put in on that. But what do you got, buddy?
Well, to follow up what Matt's talking about, that is a good album. I really liked the Joshua Tree from the 80s, but then whenever I heard Mysterious Ways and One, that's probably the two singles that come off of that. Matt's right. They played it on MTV all the time. It had a distinct sound. I really enjoyed the album. Like I did a little experiment whenever we gave everybody's top fives throughout the week. I started listening to all of these albums, and I have to say that this album really, I mean, it was a lot better than I thought it would be, because it'd been a long time since I'd listened to it, first off. And secondly, I don't know, it's a good album.
Right. Travis, do you like U2? Did you ever listen to those guys?
I listened to them a little bit. I listened to them like I used to watch MTV all the time, so I always heard the ones that come off the Joshua Tree. The still up, what is it? Still haven't found what he's looking for. But my favorite one was Sunday Bloody Sunday. Just didn't get a whole lot of radio play, but now y'all was talking about One. Have y'all heard Chris Cornell's version where he plays the music to the U2 but does the words from Metallica?
I saw that. One of my friends sent that the other day. He sent that over, and it's weird because it's the music, it's the actual music from
U2,
that, and then the lyrics from Bono. Or was it the other way around?
Yeah, it was the music.
It was the music from One, but the lyrics from Metallica.
I've never heard that. I'd like to hear that.
Oh, it's crazy. It messes with your head, because if you know both songs, it's like, okay, you've got the music, but then you've got the lyrics from two different songs that are coming into one, and it really messes your head up because you know both of these songs.
Yeah, he
I'm
used
definitely
the
gonna have to
melody
check
from
that out.
he used the melody from U2, but he used just the words from Metallica's one.
Nice.
But Chris Cornell, though, his voice, God, it's so good, though. I mean,
Yeah.
that one album, the first Soundgarden album, I almost put on my list of 5, but it's definitely on a list of like, top 25 from the 90s.
Chris Cornell, not only did he have an awesome voice, he was an awesome dude as well. You know what I'm saying? He was a real good dude. Rest in peace, Chris Cornell.
He did a cover of Prince's "Nothing Compares to You," which Sinead O'Connor had actually done a cover of, because it's originally Prince's song, but Chris Cornell done a cover of it acoustic on an XM radio thing before he died, and I mean, I think it's better than Prince's version.
Didn't Chris Cornell didn't he cover Billie Jean from Michael Jackson?
Yeah.
I don't know if he did. I never heard it.
Yeah, he did. He did it live.
Did he?
Mhm.
I gotta see that.
In between Audio Slave and Soundgarden, he went on tour, and it was just him and his acoustic guitar. And then after Audio Slave, he did that again and started putting out albums that way. And then he got back together with Soundgarden. They started touring again.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
It's hard to beat. It's hard to beat that Audio Slave. What they do, 2 albums, and man, those 2 albums were just, God, they were so good.
Yeah, they did pretty good. I think they didn't have a lot of chemistry together. I mean, the music was great, the lyric content was great, but they were from different parts of the country. I'd say Chris Cornell was probably about 10 years older than they were too. So they just didn't mesh.
It's almost like, remember Temple of the Dog that had Eddie Vedder and Chris Cornell there for like one album worth, I think.
Yeah, they did that for Andy Wood. What used to be before Pearl Jam, they were called Mother Love Bone. They had a different drummer, and they had a singer named Andy Wood. Andy Wood died of a heroin overdose, and they wanted to come up with an album just out of respect for him. They actually just wanted to do one song, which was Say Hello to Heaven. But when they went to record it, the record company wanted to put out a whole album. So some of the guys from Soundgarden and some of the guys from Pearl Jam got together, and that's how that happened.
I had that album. That was a good album.
Yeah, it was good all the way through.
Well, let's do it like this. Travis. Is Travis here? I think Travis is gone.
I'm here. I'm right here, buddy.
Hey, well, let's hear your top 5 bands. What are they, man? What's the list?
My top 5. Everclear. Well, it's top 5 albums from the 90s. As far as bands, that'd be a whole other podcast. The first one is Everclear, Sparkle and Fade. I'm not sure if that was their first album, but that was their first commercially successful album that I remember. But I listened to it all the way through.
Is that the one with Santa Monica on it?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, that's a great song, baby. Praise God.
I remember that song coming out. I think me and Corky were sitting in my bedroom one night. We'd just been playing Super Nintendo, and the sun was coming up. And remember back when MTV did those buzz clips, and Santa Monica was a buzz clip. And I remember Corky seeing it, and he goes, "Man, it's a great song. That's good. This band's gonna be so good." And they were. I mean, they're not bad. Everclear's not a bad band, but I distinctively remember that being on a buzz clip in like 6 o'clock in the morning. Santa Monica. It was great.
Santa Monica's a great song, man. What's up, Daniel?
I will say, I I've already said that I started listening to everybody's top 5 through this week. And in each album, I've found something that I've liked that it's a deeper cut and whatnot. I've ended up downloading several songs onto my own playlist from albums that I've heard once or twice, but I never really gave it a listen. It was just kind of, listening as I go. I was actually listening to everything, paying attention to everything, and there's some good songs that come off of that. That's a good album.
And that's cool that you do that when you find like somebody else's music, because I don't know about you guys, but I'm always looking for something different because I've listened to the same stuff for 30 years and I'm always looking for something new that catches me. So when you can actually go back and find something that was there the whole time that you didn't know, that's like rediscovering a new band almost.
It was really cool this week doing that. It was really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
They've got like their own little formula as far as writing songs, because it's not, they don't all sound the same. They have you can tell who it is in every song, but they're all individual as far as how they were structured.
What is that, your number one, or you got 4 more?
Yeah. You want me to go on the next?
So are we gonna take turns?
Well, I'm just asking for top 5 albums, and you can jump in there and discuss whatever you want to discuss, or however you want to do it, buddy. Roll with it.
Oh, it don't matter to me. I figured that we would just take one at a time, kind of discuss them, and then keep going.
Well, all right, baby. What do you want to discuss, McDaniel? Let's hear it, man.
Well, all right. So this is not my number one. I'm kind of going backwards. I'm gonna go from 5 to 1. Okay. My number 5 probably is one that I have the least amount to say about, but it's still a great album. It's Pearl Jam 10. Come out in 1991. It had several hit singles off of it. It had Even Flow, Alive, Black, Jeremy. Eddie Vedder has a distinct voice that sounds great. This is one of the albums that I didn't buy in 91. I didn't really start buying my own music until about the early to mid 90s. So when it comes to Pearl Jam, it's just what was on the radio, and these are the songs that I heard. I really didn't start getting into it until the late 90s, whenever I was buying more music. Go ahead, Court.
You know what's crazy is in high school, when Pearl Jam was like big, there was not a band on this earth that I hated more than Pearl Jam, or anything, or anything alternative, dude. I was so against alternative music, or that's what they called it in those days. I hated it. But let me tell you something right now. Now Pearl Jam is one of the best bands. I listen to them every day. Like I wish that I would have been on board, back in the day, but for some reason I just didn't like alternative music. But as I've got older, Pearl Jam rules, man.
So it's funny that you say that, because I was the exact same way. Okay. In the early 90s, okay, I was still listening to bands from the 80s, and I was very much against whatever was in style. Okay. So whatever the popular music was that was going on back then, I missed out as it was happening, because I was listening to stuff that was older, and that's on me. But Pearl Jam, 100%. If I think 90s, okay, I think of 2 bands when I think 90s. That's Pearl Jam and Soundgarden, but also Alice in Chains, really. Those 3 bands.
Don't forget Nirvana.
And Nirvana.
But I want to say something about Nirvana. First, when it came to Nirvana, I never liked Nirvana. The only thing that really came out of Nirvana was Dave Grohl.
Yeah.
Nirvana, to me, I don't know what the problem was, but their best album was the Unplugged album, and 90% of it was covers. So I was never really, I don't know, knocked out by Nirvana. Now their In Utero album was really, really good. I thought that was probably their best studio.
I want to ask you a question, though, okay? So you say that you didn't like Nirvana, okay?
Mhm.
And back in the day, I didn't either, okay? But now, is it because you were against anything that was in style and popular, or you really didn't like Nirvana's music?
No, I just didn't like it because I didn't. It wasn't about the cultural shift at that point. Because if you remember, you're coming out of the '80s and you got that glam metal, that Sunset Strip stuff with Guns N' Roses and Poison and Cinderella, and then it kind of faded out into Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, Nirvana. But Nirvana somehow took the lead to that new movement of grunge. I just didn't like it. I didn't think it was good. I thought Pearl Jam, even back then, was a far better band because I think 10 is still better than any Pearl Jam, or I think 10 is better than any Nirvana album out there.
Oh, you're fired.
Go, Court.
But I'll tell you how I think about it. I can recognize Nirvana has some good songs. I like two or three of their songs, but like back in '93 or '94, whenever those albums were coming out, bro, I hated them. I tell you, I was so anti freaking alternative music that it was just sad. I guess I don't understand because then like I would be at school like, man, yeah, alternative stuff sucks. Then I'd go home and be listening to some of it like, you know, like incognito. I had like real identity crisis issues back in the day.
But at least you've
Courtney
stayed
would get on to me
consistent
about it.
years.
Courtney would
Did
make
what,
fun of
Matt?
I'd have the Pearl Jam. I had the 10 album. And he'd be over at the house and he'd be like, I don't know why you like that so much. I was like, 'cause it's awesome.
Yeah, I didn't like it. Go ahead, Daniel.
So I remember me and you, Matt, making fun of Pearl Jam with the whole flannel thing. You remember
Yes.
that? When we were talking about, in order to listen to this kind of music, you gotta have flannel.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah.
remember that. And it was because, or at least for me, I'm speaking for me, it was because it was popular and in style, and I was against anything that was in style. I had no problem with grunge, for grunge because I really like what's considered grunge now. You got Stone Temple Pilots, you got Pearl Jam, you got Alice in Chains, you got Nirvana, the list goes on. I I missed out on some good music at the time because I was anti anything that was popular.
Same. Go ahead, Traps.
Well, see the the flannel stuff come about. It wasn't. It was all of them from up there. Soundgarden, um, Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, all of them. But it didn't have nothing to do with the music. That's how people dressed in Seattle. That was out there hitting the clubs and stuff. So if you look at Alice in Chains stuff when they first come out, they had flannel shirts around their waist and had boots on without laces and stuff too. So they were all in that same scene. So that's just 90% of like concerts is visual. The other 10% is what you hear. So we was watching videos back then. So flannel shirts is what we remember for most of that.
And I'll add this to what you're saying. When you talk about lead singers, okay, you talk about people like Eddie Vedder, you talk about Lane Staley. I mean, all of these distinct voices. I mean, those guys were good back then. You can always tell what the band is by their sound and the lead singer. That's because I'm telling you, they had some really good lead singers. All of them did.
And you're right, because you had Cornell. You could tell Cornell. You could tell Brian Johnson. You could tell Lane Staley. You could tell Kurt Cobain, Eddie Vedder. You're exactly right. Everyone, it was like their thumbprint.
They
Every one
were
of
so
them.
distinct.
Yeah. And if you lost one of those, it's like even Scott Weiland from Stone Temple Pilots. I mean, if you lose the front men of those bands, they're just not as good. I mean, you take Axl Rose out of Guns N' Roses, to me, it's not Guns N' Roses.
Right. Yeah. And see, Alter Bridge, when they go out on tour, that's basically Creed with another singer. and they sound completely different than Creed. And that Kennedy guy, he could sing his ass off. He could hit any note like Lane Staley could, but it's not the same. It's not the same band. And then like like Chris Cornell when he sang for Audio Slave, that was Rage Against the Machine. They never did a solo except for that little record scratching thing they did on Bulls on Parade. But when they got Chris Cornell in there, the song structures changed, and then they started putting solos in there because it called for it. But see, the singer, they've got a lot more. If they're doing the melody, they have a lot more say in the structure than some of the musicians do, I think.
Go ahead, Court.
Oh, no, I'm just listening to you guys. You guys are on a subject that I don't know much about right now. We'll get to me in a minute, and we'll see what you think about my kind of music.
Yeah.
But like I said, this alternative stuff, bro, I didn't listen to it, man. That's all I can say about it.
Another one of my favorite albums that came out of the 90s, and it came out in 1990, which is weird because out of 5 albums that are my favorites from that decade, every one of them except for The Color and the Shape came from 93 back. And if you look at Stone Temple Pilots' Purple, it's a hard choice between Purple and Core, because both those albums, if you combine them, they almost sound the same, but there's so many hits off both those albums. It's almost like a greatest hits album. It's like a double album almost for me, because I could play both of those straight through and not miss a beat and it'd be good. But I think, to me, Purple's just a little bit better, because you look at it, you got Big Empty, Silver Gun Superman, you've got what? Vaseline, Interstate Love Song, Still Remains. I mean, man, like, it's like everything, yeah. It's like everything on that album was almost good. There was a couple of throwaway songs on there, but I don't know. I remember the reason I like that album so good is because I remember buying the cassette tape. I didn't get the CD version. I bought the cassette tape at Walmart, and I stuck it in my Walkman, and I'm sitting on the front porch at my mom and dad's house, and I'm reading Batman comic books, and just listening to STP, and it was so just, I don't know, so nostalgic. Every time I listen to that album, I go back to that.
All right, so I know that I said that I was going to go, from 5 to 1, but you mentioned Purple, okay, and we're talking about Stone Temple Pilots, okay. Stone Temple Pilots Core is actually my number 1. When I think of 90s, I think of Stone Temple Pilots Core, and I just listened to that album all the way through last night. There's 2 throwaway tracks, okay. One of them is a 30-second kind of intro to one of the better songs, okay, and then there's the other one where it's just Wheeling, talking about whatever when he's high, okay. Other than those 2 songs, I can listen to that whole album from cover to cover, and the only reason why I like Core better than Purple is because it's a little heavier, okay. But when I think 90s, 100%, my number 1 90s song is going to be Plush, and that come off of Core, Stone Temple Pilots.
I remember the first time we saw the video to
that. Go ahead, Core.
Which one was Plush? Remind me. Sang some of it.
You want me to say it?
Why not? Yeah, I mean, I don't know what it is.
Yeah. And I feel there you go, that one.
What's that song Stone Temple Pilots had? It was talking about when the dogs begin to smell her. Is that Plush?
That's it. That's Plush.
Now, didn't they write that about a little girl that went missing in their town? And the whole, when the dogs begin to smell her, was because the police had dogs searching for her and stuff like that.
I honestly don't know. Travis, do you know?
I don't know. I know they're from San Diego, so that's a very good possibility.
I'm pretty sure I read that somewhere. That's what that song is actually about, is a kidnapping that happened wherever it is they're from.
Well, see, that's something else that it's just like an onion. I had no idea. And the more layers that you peel back, the more you learn, man. That's I mean, that's sad if that's what the song was written about, but that's a cool piece of information that I had no idea.
Yeah, look, go after a while and see if I'm right, but I'm pretty sure I heard that somewhere.
But you know what's crazy about STP is that after Purple, they were not whatever magic they had, whatever chemistry they was able to keep together for those first two albums. They didn't have it with the third album.
Well, Willie was on drugs real bad the whole time. That had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, when he started dressing like a woman, I was like, man, they're going downhill now. Go ahead,
Travis.
The dude was on heroin. If you go back to the first video and watch all the videos in between, you can watch the dude withering away to nothing in front of you. I mean, he was way out there on drugs. But now after you make all that money off them first two albums, because they make most of their money on touring. You know, like Michael Jackson, he went on a bad tour. He made like $330 million, and that was in 1987, you know. So they probably made about the same in the early 90s on those. Well, they're not as hungry anymore. They're up top. They don't have to write as big hits. And you kind of start running out of stuff to write about. You know, you don't know how to relate to the guy that's buying your stuff. You know how to relate to the rich people because you live on a golf course now, you know.
That happened with Bruce Springsteen because when Bruce Springsteen first started, he was like a newer version of Bob Dylan, and it was like more down to earth type people, you know, people who were working in steel mills and textile mills. And then he started getting money and his sound started changing. Well, then you couldn't relate to Springsteen anymore. And then by the time he got to Philadelphia, where he wrote that song from that movie, Philadelphia, it's like that was Springsteen was totally different after that.
And I could see that. Getting back to Stone Temple, the album number 4, I guess it's called 4 or whatever, from Stone Temple. It had a couple of good songs on it, but Sour Girl was probably the last good song from Stone Temple Pilots that I remember. That was a good song, but it was a bad album.
There's one more on there you probably haven't heard. It's called Atlanta. You ever heard it?
I don't believe so. I heard Down. Is that what it's called? Down?
No, the name of the song is called Atlanta.
Yeah, there's one other track that's on there other than Sour Girl that I'm trying to think of, and I can't think of what it is.
They had Lady Picture Show was on there too.
I remember that one.
And there was another one, Monday or something. About the day of the week, something like that. But listen to Atlanta. It's pretty good. It's acoustic. But they did it they didn't do it live. They did it in a studio, but it's really good. It's a lot different than what you would think Stone Temple Pilots would write. Well,
I'll check it out then. It's been a long time since I've heard that album. But I remember Sour Girl was just about the only one that I liked. But I'm going to check it out again and listen for those songs.
I remember seeing the video of Sour Girl. I remember seeing the video of Sour Girl at your house, Daniel. I remember it being on.
The girl in it was actually
Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, that's Sarah Michelle Gellar. She's married to Freddie Prinze Jr. Go ahead,
yeah.
George. Something to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, when you guys, we've talked about who we've talked about. Was it U2, and we've talked about Stone Temple Pilots. Well, everybody knows, and Everclear. Everybody knows I'm just a little bit different when it comes to music from the rest of you guys. So, yeah, I appreciate that. Praise God. But anyhow, so like when we talked about this earlier in the week, I had to sit down and really think because, you know, I remember telling you guys, to me, music is a time machine. And I had to really think, man, what music takes me somewhere, Difference in me and a lot of you guys is one of the main albums that influenced my life was Dr. Dre, The Chronic. And on top of that is also Easy E's 187 Killer, which is the answer to Dr. Dre, The Chronic. It's like your first two diss albums there, you know what I'm saying? But go ahead, Daniel.
That's what I was about to say. Those guys hated each other. And when I listened to the Chronic yesterday, all the way through, start to finish, and they were dissing Easy E and they were dissing somebody else through the whole thing. And I had forgot about that. I had completely forgot about that whole beef.
Yeah, the whole thing was when they were, because see, they came from NWA. And what happened is Easy E, Eric Wright, he had a backdoor deal. He was making all the money. None of the rest of the guys were making any money. And Ice Cube was one of them that come to him and said, look, if I'm going to keep doing this, I'm going to have to make some money. And they kept saying, hey, we'll get you some money. We'll get you some money. And they kept going on. And finally, they all just broke up. But it was because the way Easy E had the deal set up, he made the money and those guys got the chump change, So that's where that beef come from is a bad record deal.
So in the Chronic, okay, they mentioned Easy E, but they mentioned somebody else too a few times. Do you remember who that was?
Was it Tim Dog?
Maybe.
They probably mentioned a lot of people. I don't remember a lot about it, but the main beef was Easy E and Dr. Dre and Ice Cube. They were all basically mad at him for, basically giving them a raw deal, when they signed the contracts for the group. I don't think any of the rest of the guys even signed the contract. I think Easy E signed the contract and they were just in his group, I think Ice Cube says today he should have known better, but you live and you learn, But that album, I can hear G Thing, and no matter what I'm doing, when I hear G Thing, I'm back in the summertime, doing something when the weather's great and just feeling good, because that song takes me there. It takes me to the summer. And I think would it come out in 92, something like that?
It come out in the early 90s. I know that they mentioned the riots that was going on in LA in that CD several times. So that's going to be somewhere around 91, 92.
Yeah, I think it come out in 92. Now when I was going through high school and I started listening to Dr. Dre and Easy E, and then like I said, identity crisis in high school. Then I started hearing, this stuff called heavy metal, and this band called Pantera, and this dude that had a big bright beard playing the guitar and was some of the best guitar playing I've ever heard in my life. And that's probably about the same time Travis came around, and honestly, the guitar is why me and Travis started hanging out so much, because for a time of my life when I was in high school, I wanted to play the guitar worse than anybody on this earth. And I swear, I remember sitting on my bed one time trying to play Paranoid by Black Sabbath for 14 hours straight. And I may have got up to go get something to drink and pee. You remember that little white guitar I used to have? Yes. I remember I sat there for 14 hours straight. And in my mind, I finally got it. It probably sucked if anybody else heard it, but in my mind, I finally got it. But still, yeah. But another thing that stood out with me, Pantera's Far Beyond Driven is the album that really stuck me on to Pantera. And I'll tell you another odd thing that made me like Pantera. I always liked headbanging and that music, how it made me feel, but I wasn't about to grow my hair out long. There's just no way. Then I seen this dude in Pantera. This joker's bald-headed, and he's headbanging. And, man, that's just something you didn't see. If you were in a metal band, you had long hair. This guy named Phil, man, he's got a bald head, and he's out here banging. And from that day forward, I loved freaking Pantera. And to this day, they're my favorite band, period. You know, a lot of people will argue with me, but I'll say Dimebag Darrell's the greatest guitarist ever lived. Go ahead, Daniel.
Well, I wanted you to finish your thought, and I know that Travis is going to have a whole lot more to say on this subject than what I do. But I do want to tell this one little story. Okay, I work with a guy who knew a guy, okay, that lived in an apartment next to this old lady. All right. And he ended up over time making friends with the little old lady, and she kept talking about her grandson was in this band. Okay. Just this little old band, I'm not real sure what it is, and all this other, you know. Turns out her grandson in that little old band was Phil Anselmo. Okay. And that guy lives next to Phil Anselmo's grandma. Now, this woman, I'm sure, has passed away a long time ago. But the guy that I work with at work was telling me about that, and I thought that was so cool.
That'd be so awesome.
Yes.
Travis, I know you got something to say, buddy. Let's hear it.
When I first heard them, because my oldest brother come down here from Virginia. When I think he come down about 93 or 94.
That'd be Kurt.
Yeah, and they had just come out. The Cowboys from Hell had come out in 1990. But see, they were in a glam band in the 80s. They were completely different in the 80s.
They had 4 albums in the 80s.
Yeah, they were Motley Crueing it up, you know, and so they grew out of that and started doing something. They couldn't get a record deal. They said they sent a demo to every record company twice, and they kept passing them over, and they started doing their own thing, and they were supposed to go back to Texas, but Hurricane Andrew or Hugo, whichever one come through South Carolina, they were stuck there, so they got to play another night. And a executive was there because he couldn't fly out either, and he heard them play, and that's how they got signed. And so that's, you know, they kept on with the metal thing. But he did, he played a lot different than everybody else. The stuff he was doing was space age compared to what Kirk Hammett and all them was doing. You know, Kirk Hammett might have won all the guitar contests in New York, but Dimebag actually got kicked out of competing in guitar contest in Texas because he won all of them, left-handed and right-handed.
Mm-hmm.
So they made him a judge because that was the only thing that was fair for everybody else.
That's what I was going to say. He won them all, and they wouldn't allow him to compete, so they made him a judge. I heard that too.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Well, to continue to what y'all two are talking about, in the 80s, they were a glam band. In the 90s, they completely changed their image. In 1990, when Cowboys from Hell come out, that's when Phil Anselmo come onto the scene. And from the documentary that I've watched and the YouTube videos and whatnot that I've seen, they very much wanted to change their image from the hair metal and the glam to a much harder sound. And so they got that, they achieved that, and every album they tried to make it a little bit harder.
Yeah, they got I think he come from Armored Saint, right? Is that where Phil came from?
I believe so.
He came up, but if you in like Cowboys from Hell, he still had some of that 80s falsetto going on. He was still doing some of the 80s. They call it falsetto, but it's screaming. What it sounds like
he could get really, really high. He'd get really, really high pitch.
Yeah, and Dimebag would match it with a guitar.
And go higher.
Yeah.
And each album, they tried to get heavier and heavier. I know they changed the sound of the drums almost every CD. They changed just the heaviness, the overall heaviness, every CD. I will say that Far Beyond Driven is probably the last great CD that they did. When they got to reinventing the steel, I think that they got a little too heavy and they kind of lost a little bit of their musicality.
Well, they weren't in the same studio when they recorded it either.
That is correct.
They sent all the music to Louisiana so Phil could do the lyrics. Then they sent it back.
That's around Same time that Phil was had a really bad heroin problem.
Yeah. Well, and also his bass drum sound a lot different than everybody else's was back then. The way because you could hear it clicking. The way that he made it click is he took a 50-cent piece and he taped a piece of leather over it where the kick beater hits, and that's what the click is. That's why his bass drum sounds much different than everybody
Is
else.
that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Heck yeah, learn something new every day. Well, I tell you what, guys. Go ahead, Daniel.
I was going to say, while we're on the subject of Pantera, I've got Pantera Vulgar Display of Power as one of my top 5. And
yes,
Vulgar Display, I think, was the 3rd album in the series, if I'm not mistaken. It's either the 2nd or 3rd album. I can't remember exactly. It come out in 1992. That's the one that had Mouth for War, A New Level, Walk, This Love. Some of the deeper cuts is Regular People Conceit. That is a heavy, heavy song. It's another CD that I can listen to from start to finish, no problem. I mean, this is only May, and I probably listened to that album 3 times all the way through already.
That's a daily listener, man. You can't beat that album. It's awesome.
In my opinion, that's the best Pantera album that's out there. Far Beyond Driven is going to be my number 2, but Vulgar Display is going to be my number 1.
Yeah, Vulgar. Yeah, I honestly forgot all about Vulgar. That's hands down their best album. You can't top that album for them.
Now, Vulgar Display of Power. I don't know that they got this from the movie, but in the movie The Exorcist, okay, Reagan McNeil is talking to the priest, and he asked her to do something telekinetically or whatever, and she says, "No, that's much too vulgar display of power." And I don't know if they got that from that movie or not, but that's pretty cool.
I don't know. That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, guys, we're about a little over an hour right now, so let's do this. I'm going to go around. We'll start with Matt, and just give me your top 5 albums, and we'll talk about it a little bit, and we'll get through it like that. So, Matt, give me your top 5.
Well, we've already talked about Hot Tongue Baby, which I think was probably U2's best album ever. We've already talked about Purple, which I think is probably, I mean, it's a toss-up between that and Core, but I kind of favor Purple a little bit just because of the personal connection. But another one of mine is Razor's Edge from AC/DC. That album, to me, is right up on the same level as Back in Black. I don't know what it is about it, because I remember getting that album from Daniel because he had it and he let me borrow it. And I remember taking it home, and I remember the one song that really grabbed me was Let's Make It, because it was so different than everything else that AC/DC had done at that point to me. Because you had the hard ones like Thunderstruck, Money Talks, but man, Let's Make It, there was just something about that song that to me made the whole album. Shot of Love, that's a good one.
Mistress for Christmas was my favorite off of that one.
That's a good one.
If You Dare was mine.
That's a good one too. That whole album is good. It's like, I'm telling you, if Purple and Core are almost mirrors, then Back in Black and Razor's Edge are the same way. To me, because if you take Back in Black and you take Razor's Edge and just play them both straight through, they sound great back to back. I don't know, man. I think Razor's Edge is one of my favorites. One of my favorite. It's not only just a favorite all time, or one from the 90s, but it's a favorite all time album, because that's one I could just play all day.
Do you think
next one would
Johnson,
be? Do
you think Brian Johnson wrote the lyrics on any of Back in Black?
Me and you have talked about that, and I've listened to Brian Johnson talk. He did an interview because me and you had talked about that. And you know how Facebook is, when you talk about something, there's always something there, like an advertisement or a reel that comes up.
Yeah.
Brian Johnson was talking about how he wrote the lyrics to that and the guys didn't like it. So they had to keep retooling it until they got what they wanted.
Mhm.
And I was like, but I get what you're saying because you and I talked about that, but I don't know.
I think Bon Scott had already wrote, because Highway to Hell come out in 1979. He dies. They go to the funeral, and now they have 13 new songs written and recorded in less than a year, and that's the best one they put out. You know what I'm saying?
So that was always my question. I don't know that Bon Scott wrote all of the lyrics for the stuff on Back in Black, but I do think that Bon Scott's influence definitely went into that CD very heavily. That's a question that I've always wondered is how much of it is Bon and how much of it is Brian Johnson.
But like even the way that the lyrics are written, Brian Johnson does what most singers do. The second, the word on the second line at the end rhymes with the one at the end of the fourth line.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what Bon Scott did a lot is he would write 3 lines, and each word at the end would rhyme. And if you look Back in Black, almost all the way through it is written like that, but every CD after that is written how Brian Johnson wrote them, second and fourth. So it's just a big jump, even though he was the singer then and he got credit for it. I think that they give him credit so he'd get a bigger paycheck because Bon Scott wasn't going to use that money in hell, But I mean, he was on the highway, son, one-way ticket. But
Rest in peace.
Yeah, praise God. But the just like Jason Newsted, they gave him $1 million to sign with Metallica there, and on Injustice for All, he didn't even record nothing. You can't even hear the bass, but they still paid him $1 million.
Right. And it would have sounded a lot better if you could have heard the bass. But
Yeah,
I've got a quick question. I know it's off topic, but this is for all of us, but specifically you, Travis, and Matt. Okay. And me and Matt's talked about this before. AC/DC, who's the better lead? Is it Bon or is it Brian? In your opinion?
Me, it's going to be Brian Johnson and here's why. Brian Johnson, we don't know how good AC/DC would have been if they would have been any better with Bon Scott. If he'd have stayed alive, who knows? But Brian Johnson is the voice of that band. They had the most hits during his tenure, some of the best albums during his tenure. To me, it's Brian Johnson, hands down.
What do you think, Travis?
I think if Bon Scott would have lived, I don't think they would have been together as long as they have, just because his voice was unique, but it wasn't like Brian Johnson's. You think about AC/DC, you think about Brian Johnson. Now, the songs that Brian Johnson sings, he sings them better. He's a lot better singer. But I think as far as lyrical content, Bon Scott wins that all day. But as far as the sound and meshing with the band, I'm with you on that. I think Brian Johnson took that.
Corky, you want to weigh in?
I would love to weigh in, man. Just because I like a little Dr. Dre and Snoop every now and then, don't mean I didn't like a little AC/DC too in my life. You feel me? But I'd have to go with what was the guy that didn't die?
Brian Johnson.
Brian Johnson.
He's still alive.
Yeah, that guy's the singer to me because I never really heard him when that other guy was there, but he had a unique voice. I'll say that. Praise God. But both of them really have a unique voice, don't they?
They really do. That's what I was going to say.
And here's a tidbit too. See, they went to when they got done playing, they went across the street to see another band called Geordie play. This is when Bon Scott was alive, and Brian Johnson was the singer for Geordie, and he said, "If something ever happens to me, that's your next singer right there." And he's the only one they auditioned after he died.
I never hear.
Court.
Oh, go ahead. I was just gonna say, we're getting a little late on time. We need to wrap it up, but go ahead and finish what you was going to say there, Matt.
No, I mean, I think that if you look at albums back in the 90s, I mean, I've also got, The Color and the Shape from Foo Fighters, which I think is probably, of course, Foo Fighters are my main band. Everything they got, I think, is great. But I think The Color and the Shape is probably their best album, track one to the very final track. Because I remember buying that album I guess it was the fall of 97, because we had graduated high school and things were different. Because I remember that graduation night that we were all at Corky's house and we were playing that Kiss Unplugged album like endlessly while we were playing video games. And and I remember thinking, this is probably the last time we're all going to be together. And then I got to thinking, man, things are really going to change right now. There's everything's changing. So when I listen to that album, I'm like, that signifies the change, and that's why that album's really personal to me.
Cool.
That I'm glad you said that, because the Hootie and the Blowfish album, Cracked Rear View, we talked about this earlier in the week, and I listened to that when I was at work, and that Matt, that's exactly what that album represents to me. That it's like we were graduating high school, and I don't even know when it came out. I'm just saying that's when I was listening to it.
Cracked Rear View, I think, come out somewhere around 95 or 96, if I'm not.
No, it was earlier than that. It was
really?
93, because I remember instinctively, I want to say it was because Fairweather Johnson came out like in 95 or 96, and Cracked Rear View came out like I want to say 92 or 93. But I remember being in Derek's. Remember where Derek lived, and we were always in there playing ping pong.
Yeah,
we'd
out there in
the country. Always play that album, and that's why I remember that album so well. Is because you'd be sitting on that couch listening, and me and Derek would be sitting there playing ping pong, and that's where I remember. That's my memory to that album. Every song.
You talking about that little white house that you lived in?
This was Derek's house.
Oh, that house. Okay.
It was way out in the country. He didn't live there long, but that album, dude, like I can listen to it now and I get a pit in my stomach because that's just like you said, stuff was ending then and stuff was changing. And then that album will always take me to probably that night in my bedroom where we was all sitting there playing PlayStation 1, graduation night, because I'm just thinking like everybody was like, this is a change here. You know what I'm saying?
I want to add to that. Okay. Danzig 3 is in my top 5, and I wish that I could have talked more about it, but that is exactly how I feel. That is, I've actually got it in my notes right here. That is the most nostalgic album for me when I think about how it was in high school and how it was with us four. Travis didn't come on the scene until we were sophomores. Travis is a year behind us, but from sophomore year on, Danzig 3 had already come out, and that's what we were listening to at the time. And for me, when I want to get nostalgic and I really want to feel like I felt like when I was in high school, I listened to it from start to finish, Godless on, all of it.
Show Me How the Gods Kill, baby. That's a great album. I feel the same way about it too. But hey, before we wrap up, let's start with Travis. Let's go around. Give me the top 5 real quick. Go, Travis.
Everclear, Sparkle and Fade, Lit, Fun in the Sun, Filter, Title of Record. These last two is way back. Guns N' Roses, Use Your Illusion 1, and Nirvana, Nevermind. But I got a couple honorable mentions. That'd be Ozzy Osbourne's No More Tears, and Alanis Morissette, believe it or not, Jagged Little Pill.
We were talking about that. Me and my brother-in-law were talking about Jagged Little Pill today on my way home from the doctor. And I said, that album was really good all the way through. I don't know what it was, but it just captured that moment of the 90s in that album. It was really good.
That's inside my wife's top 5. that's one of her top 5.
Daniel, what's your top 5, man?
All right, my top 5. We've already discussed Pearl Jam. We've already discussed Stone Temple Pilots and Pantera. The other 2 are Alice in Chains' "Jar of Flies" and Danzig 3, of course.
Matt, what do you got, baby?
Man, the only thing I got left after The Color and the Shape was "Out of Time" by REM. And the reason that album to me is good is because it has my number 2 all-time favorite movie or favorite song, "Losing My Religion."
It's a good
And there was
jam.
not a bigger song that REM ever had other than "Losing My Religion." And I remember the very first time I heard it, I'm up in Daniel's bedroom, and it's back when WIMZ was, they would play some newer music every once in a while. And he was playing Nintendo. It was hot. God, it was hotter than hell up there. And I'm sitting in the window with it open, trying to get some air. And he's just sitting there going on whatever game he's playing. And that song comes on. And man, it just, I don't know. Every time I hear that song, I've heard it at least 1,000,000 times. I'm always back there. And every time I listen to that whole album, it just encapsulates me being back in 91 again.
Matt, did you say that was your number 2 or number 1?
Number 2 all time song.
2 all-time song? Because I thought that was your number 1.
Everlong is number 1.
Oh, that's another good one.
Everlong and Losing My Religion, because those 2 songs right there represent so much. Because if The Color and the Shape represented the change, Everlong was the biggest song off that album, and it's the biggest song probably Foo Fighters ever did. That song represents a lot of change for me. Losing My Religion represents an instant time in my life where I can just remember sitting in a window looking out the street that we lived on at nighttime, and nothing mattered. It was just being in that moment where you're playing Nintendo and I'm just looking out the night in the sun, and that's what it means to me. So those 2 songs will always be 1 and 2. Love them.
Corky, what's your number 1? Or what's your 5? What's your 5?
Man, that's awesome. Like I said, my top 5 is going to be different from you guys, but it really in no particular order. I'm going with Dr. Dre's The Chronic, Eazy-E, 187 Killer, Pantera, Vulgar Display of Power.
For you.
Yeah, well, I'm changing it now that you said Vulgar Display of Power had all that, because I think I had my albums mixed up. But yeah, I'm gonna go Vulgar. Then we go. Of course, we got to go Danzig, because I think, especially with me, Matt, and Daniel, that album, blew our mind when it came out. As far as, I don't even know. I think Travis's brother brought it down from like Virginia Beach or something like that.
So that's what I was about to say. Travis's brother Kurt actually introduced us all to Danzig 1. If y'all will remember, we all 4 went to the Etowah tennis court and was playing tennis, and little Kurt drove us. And while we were playing tennis, he was sitting in the truck waiting for us, and he was listening to Danzig 2. I'm not sure Danzig 3 had come out at that point. Maybe it had, but I know that he was blasting Danzig.
Oh, it was cool. It was a 67 Chevelle Dad had.
What's that?
It was a 67 Chevelle Dad had that he was listening to it in.
Okay. So
that
you
was such
remember that?
Huh?
So you remember that happened because we were at the Etowah tennis courts, all 4 of us.
Yeah, he was parked up there on the. He wasn't in the gravel part. He was in the actual parking lot part over there next to the fence.
Yes, he was right next to the fence.
That moment right there that Daniel's talking about, when I wrote Summerland, I put a whole chapter in there about Kurt introducing us to Danzig.
Yeah, praise God.
Moment, really, because you think about the only thing we knew about Danzig at that point was that buzz clip from Mother.
I mean that was Demon Sweat Live '93, and that was the only thing that I knew from Danzig was from what they were playing on MTV. And Travis's brother Kurt come in and introduced us to it completely opened my world up. Go ahead, Court.
Oh, I'm just saying I have one more album of Drop Onions. Then we're gonna have to cut on out of here. Y'all ready for this one?
Do it.
R. Kelly, 12 play.
Oh man.
Hey, and this was all before he got into all his pedophilia or whatever it is he done.
That's
what
them
it
little kids.
That's when he was hanging out on the beach, just wishing that a jellyfish would sting somebody so he could pee on them.
Yeah, so that was before he was peeing on everybody, or at least we didn't know he was peeing on everybody. But hey, guys, I think this was an awesome show, man. We're at about an hour and a half right now, so we're gonna have to wrap it up. But I think it's an awesome show. We're gonna get back together next Thursday, where I think things are gonna get a little spooky next week. So everybody, get ready to get back with us next week. I think we're gonna have our first guest on next week. So we appreciate everybody listening to us. We're going to sign off and see you next week. Bye.